Hello, welcome from Mexico. This is an integration video from our Ayahuasca ceremony last night. And the intention here is just to come on and share the lessons, insights, and learnings from the ceremony. I like to make these videos whenever I do ceremonies, not all the time, but especially when there's something important for me that I have a breakthrough, and just to share about the wisdom of the plants and how they can help us in our journeys and what it's helping me with. And Rhea and I were both in a ceremony together with Ronaldo, who I've never sat with him, and in fact I've never sat with anyone outside of Peru before. So this was really special to see a new way of doing ceremony and different protocols, and just being able to appreciate the beauty of different protocols. And the different ways that we can open to the medicine and work with the medicine, really. So the ceremony was a really powerful one for me. Even though the actual medicine itself appeared to be very gentle for me, it's actually this particular strain is called Yagé.
Yeah, it's from Colombia.
Yeah, so the way they shared this, it's kind of like the masculine pole of ayahuasca.
It's their grandfather.
The grandfather energy of ayahuasca, which is traditionally known as the mother, and the grandmother energy.
Yeah, ayahuasca is more grandmotherly, and they say that from the Colombian lineage, it's more of the grandfather. So slightly different ways to work with the plant, and slightly different ways to understand the plant, slightly different everything.
Slightly different everything. But I thought that was really interesting, because again, I've never sat with this variation of this teacher plant. So our intention was shared in certain capacity, but ultimately my highest intention for the ceremony was to deepen into union with this one here, this beloved, and deepen in love, which is, I kind of was thinking more into that, but it's this endless journey of learning to deepen into love with ourselves, and if you're in partnership, to deepen further and further into love with your beloved, because it's an endless journey of how much you can open and be vulnerable and just open your heart to the beauty that is our lives. But we can't always feel it, and I was particularly feeling kind of blocked coming into ceremony, and it's been a few months where I knew I was blocked in some way, and I just couldn't identify it. I basically couldn't figure it out, so I was really feeling called to Aya to help. And then lo and behold, here we are, and this ceremony just kind of appeared in perfect alignment, and that tends to be how it works. Things just appear in resonance with what the thing we're looking for and searching for. So going in, that was part of my intention, was just to deepen in love and union, and to open to a journey that we're kind of coming into, which is opening to children and the journey of parenthood. And that's, I think, when we really have to deal with all our stuff. So I think a lot of our bullshit gets called forward, and if we can it's an endless journey of clearing, but if we can do some of that work, that high-end work, before we have children, the more the better. So that was my intention coming into ceremony. And so the first section of the ceremony was quite gentle for me. This ayahuasca ceremony goes all the way through the night, which usually they don't. Usually they kind of end in 3 in the morning kind of thing. So I was asleep, I think, for the good... I think I drifted in and out of dream states for the first section. But there was a time when we get called to the front. There was a group that would get, a few different people would come to the front altar, and they would do work with us. And when we were up at the altar, I had a very clear picture, an image. The teaching appeared to me in the form of an image. And so I was really grateful for the clarity of the teaching. But what it showed me it simply took me into this very vivid image of my mother and my father when they were having me, and it was a vision of them in the hospital. They were very young, and the teaching was just showing me how much they wanted me, how much they believed in me at that moment of birthing me. They wanted to have me, they wanted to create me. And it was really just seeing how young they were. My mom was so young. She was 22 or something. She just looked like such a young person, way younger than I am now. And I just cried. I opened into love, just how much I love my parents. And I know I harnessed some levels of anger around having to feel like I fought my mom a lot of my life, trying to fight for who I am, fight for what I want all the time, a lot of disagreements. And I think this first image just showed me all the way back to like, this is the person who created you, and through her own will and her own belief and her own wanting to create you. So it just left me opening to like tears and crying, and I hadn't cried in, I don't think she's ever seen me cry, probably not. Have you? Okay, she has, but I started opening and crying, and it was just tears of beauty and joy, and the release really felt good because I hadn't cried in a while, like in that way. When I was 28 years old is when I really learned how to cry, and it was a really opening and liberating experience to have access to that emotion. And it's been a few years where I haven't really connected to like my own sadness. And there's a lot of times where I'm sure that would have been the appropriate emotion, and I wasn't tapping into it. So this opened me to that joy through a lens of love, and that was beautiful. So I got to experience that. It was the first teaching, and the first image is that my parents wanted me in a big way, and they created me, and that was good. Then about maybe 2 hours later or so, I had another even more powerful breakthrough, and this came in the form of another image, and it was a limiting belief that's been stored in my body and in my psyche for some time now. I actually don't know how old it is, but I think it's probably all the way back to when I was maybe 10 years old or less. And Ronaldo, when in the interview at the start of the ceremony, said that I'd be working with my inner child in the ceremony, and that I had to work with my relationship to my mother. I told him like one sentence, and he's just like, I said I wanted to get deep into my relationship with my beloved, and we were struggling with some various things that was bringing up anger for me. And then he just immediately was like, what's your relationship with your mother? And I was like, some anger and some resistance, or what's the word? I was restriction. I was feeling restricted, and in my heart, in my chest, and I was just like, but I was feeling it with her, and then I was projecting it onto her, and I knew that wasn't a complete understanding of what I was experiencing those last several months. So John Ronaldo is like, what's your relationship to your mother? And I'm like, oh my God, it's restriction. Always being restricted by her, and feeling like she's restricting me, and being angry at her because of those restrictions. So this next image took me into, the imagery was basically a big oval shape, and the oval shape had hues of pink and black and white, and it was like a big orb, and I was positioned in this orb as like a seedling. And within this orb, this thing was representative of the belief of my mom suppressing me as a seedling. So I've been birthed by my mom. I'm the seed. And there was a feeling of like this orb being like, don't grow into what you're meant to become. And that voice was coming through as my mom. So that's a fucked up, that's a fucked up belief of the person creating you saying, don't grow into what you're meant to become. And that pain of this belief, because in this moment, there was two realizations. One is that my mom never actually sat me down and said, hey, don't grow into what you become. This is something self-created. It was inside of me, and it was actually located in the mind, like in the brain, and it was also in my belly. This belief that I have fabricated and attached to, of that I believe that I'm being restricted by someone else, which is not actually truth. That's not the reality. I have created this limit, and I've created it for whatever reason to create resistance so that I can break through my own resistance. And so there was a big grief of how sad this was that I've been living with this restriction. And I just absolutely broke down crying. And you know, like the uncontrollable kind of crying where you're just like convulsing almost. But it was mixed with like this compassion. She was holding me, and she was just encouraging me. She's just like, good boy, right? And I'm opening to this, and I'm just like going through it, and I'm feeling like super supported by her. I'm feeling super supported by ayahuasca, by like the mastery of this orchestration to show me the teaching in such a beautiful way. And I'm just like grieving it. And I did that until I was done. I just went right into it with a very conscious openness to it, and let the water flow through my eyes, and just let my body do what it wants, and just being open to the experience, and taking notice of all the different colors and the shapes and where in my body it's located and the feelings that go along with it, and bringing that conscious awareness to the experience until it was complete. And then the moment it was complete, what was that, like five or 6 minutes? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe 10.
10 minutes? Okay, so this process is underway, and I'm being guided by Aya, and it reminds you that these things called grief or anger or whatever we have to go through, these are the tools we use to release energy, to release that which is no longer useful. So when we actually go into the grief head on and stay with it until it is dissolved and complete, and then the moment I got out of it, I opened my eyes, smile at her, and then everyone's dancing and the ceremony's underway, and I just got up and I was free. I'm like, and I was so excited. I was just like, I feel great. I'm so, and it was free. Like, it felt like my whole chest opened, my eyes like deepened in blue. Like, I just looked different. I felt different. And that was the teaching. And I last thing I'll say before Rita's going to share her experience at the ceremony, there was a deep respect for the medicine and how this is advanced mastery. These are advanced teacher plants, and that is something that's extremely important to know about working with these medicines. Like, the articulation of the way it took me through the journey, the way it positioned me in loving relations with my mother and father before showing me the core wound that I have with my mother that I've created. The way it did that was so delicately and masterfully orchestrated, and I had a deep reverence for the plant as I was coming out of it and going through it. I'm like, my God, like, I'm kind of grieving, but I'm also like, this is brilliant, like how this plant is doing this so masterfully. Like, so I was in this deep like bow reverence to the plants, and then she's holding me and I'm grieving, and it's just brilliant. So that was my experience, and that's some powerful stuff, is to remember we often come into these places where we don't feel free, and part of it was like my freedom to express myself the way I'm doing right now on film, and no one knows who we're meant to become except for us. That was a belief that I was looking to my mom. She birthed me, she created the seed, but she can't tell me what the seed is meant to grow into. No one can, and only I know what I'm meant to grow into. And so we have to go within ourselves and expand based on what we were born to be. Don Ronaldo reminded us that your mother, they didn't choose, you chose your mother and father based on who you were meant to become, and the obstacles you wanted to overcome, and the new perspectives you wanted to develop in the growth of the collective. So it's not them on them. It's I chose to be here in this way, and I chose to come through life with these challenges because that's my unique purpose at this particular time in this particular form. And I've been here before and will be here again, but for this particular time, this is what I'm meant to be, and I'm meant to grow in the ways that I have to dig within to understand what I'm seated to become. And I can't look to my mom or anyone else to tell me what I'm meant to be. So Don Ronaldo was brilliant. Just a pure conduit of spirit is really how he felt. That was the experience that he just opened this container to come speak and share in a way that's in purity with the spiritual truth. Thank you for listening, if you listened. And then, Ree was sitting by me the whole ceremony.
Yeah, it was really special the way that it came to be. I've been having some whisperings from grandmother Aya for some time now, but they became really strong, and then I'm living in the desert by myself, and Brad's off on a climbing trip, and we still feel really, really unified, and it feels like we've kind of overcome a really special and strong year with a lot of challenge, but we've overcome something. I'm like, baby, you know what? I really want to celebrate. Really want to celebrate us, and I've been feeling baby spirit around us for a long time. So I was feeling this really big desire to have like a union ceremony, and like I want to go in front of some sort of God, like some sort of luminosity, the greatest truth that I know has come through plant spirit. So I was really desiring a union ceremony in front of something luminous. Not just our will, but I've always hoped to be guided by a higher will in whatever I do, but definitely my partnership, and definitely if there's baby spirit around, I'm like, I need to be witnessed in my desires for this, and I also need to be cleared, because the year that we had, while incredibly over, still has like little seeds of a dark consciousness that I couldn't quite understand where they were coming from, and we were a bit at a stalemate. Our love was growing, but there was one thing between us that felt like, and we both couldn't quite get to the seed consciousness of it. I would show up in pain, he would show up in defensiveness, and we couldn't get past it. I'm like, well, this must change before a baby spirit comes through. My body needs to be a clear vessel. So that was my greatest intention. And then, turns out, there's a Yagé ceremony around the corner from us. So of course we go. And before we even sat with Yagé, I was completely filled with, I got everything I needed before we even sat with the medicine, because the medicine was truly coming forward from the abuelos. So abuelo Ronaldo and then abuela Bebiana.
Yeah.
I was absolutely gifted the pure presence of a pure luminous being, of luminous beings who knew themselves as beings of eternal light, having a deeply human experience. So they would never negate the human experience, but they would completely and calmly and confidently redirect people in their untruth. There are many people who are trying to live from a human experience, failing. And so they would just correct them and be like, life is not hard. Life is actually easy. And the offerings of truth and wisdom would just like make us both deeply smile. And so I went forward to them and I shared my intention about wanting to be a clear vessel of like a conduit of light for a baby spirit, but then to also work with this one thing.
Yeah.
The seed of mistrust. Where is this coming from? I don't understand. It's not in the present, it's in the past. And how far past are we really working with? Because we both go unconscious. And they looked at me, Abuelo Ronaldo, he looked at me and he's like, what's your relationship like with your mother? I'm like,
he asked us both. He's like, what's your relationship with your mother?
He knows. And so I'm like, well, my dad raised me. My mom wasn't there as a mother in a present force. You know, I'm in your everyday life being a present mother. In another way she was. But he looked at me and he's like, you have to pray to your matriarchal line to help remove the fear of becoming a mother. And it was this force of an impact on my body and on my being. Like it's the most painful place for me to look. So of course I haven't looked there. The most painful relationship that you ever have. You're like, oh no, I'll distract myself by like, surely it's me, or surely it's over here, surely it's over here. I'll procrastinate. I'll clean everything in the house, but just don't make me do this.
It doesn't. It never shows up where you you set these intentions and it'll take you there if you have the courage to go where it wants, but that's where the surrender comes in. I had no idea that I was going back into childhood in that ceremony. No idea. And you're going all the way back to like...
But yeah, it's really sweet because I see a child in him quite often. the part that comes up, you know?
Yeah.
But
the unhealed child,
This is what comes up, though, in conflict. And this is what comes up in your soulmate relationship. We are meant to see the part of ourselves that we have never healed. And we would never go back to that part because it's too painful. We would only do it for love. We would only do it because we are always choosing love. And so that's why soulmate relationships, like there's nothing as powerful to elevate your consciousness as this. So I was gifted so much by these luminous beings already kind of paving the way for me to like, look at this. This is the thing.
Yeah.
So I was in a deeply tender spot. But my ceremony was just no mind. I was not, like, nothing was going on up here, which is like a beautiful thing. And I was deeply in my body, and my womb was just being really worked on, because again, if you look at epigenetics, like, where is the sphere coming from around being a mother? Ultimately, probably from my grandmother, which is then seeded through my mother, which is then seeded through me. So I had something really powerful to work with there. And I ultimately came into this beautiful understanding that Ronaldo looked at me and he's like, you're not your mother and you're not your grandmother. Like, look at who you are now. And I think that kind of touches on what Brad was saying, is like, we as beings completely choose our parents, and our parents are perfect.
He emphasized that so much.
The way that your parents showed up and the way that your parents didn't show up, you knew, and you chose that, and you needed that for the journey you wanted to have.
Yeah.
And so I was really holding this in a great deal of honor, because I know that everything my mom gave me by not giving me is creating a depth of strength in me to become the mother that I needed. And I say this with full respect to my mom, but in the acknowledgement of what I had to work with has now created so much of a strength and a trust in myself that, right, I have to go back and heal this. I have to honor my ancestors. I have to ask for their help, but I also have to be deeply present. And the only way to be deeply present with the truth of us, of this, is actually by sometimes taking a step way back to heal, so you can come back and be present. Take a step way back to heal and come back and be present.
Yeah, because that's the core of it, is that so much of what we were fighting about was just all from the past. We had to bring the past forward so that we have something to fight about, but the reality in the present moment was not like any of that.
Our present moment was actually
our present moment was beautiful and loving, but we haven't moved on yet. We haven't let go as deeply as possible. And whether it's the past or future aspirations, if you're being moved out of the present, you cannot be in deep reciprocity and presence and gratitude for what is right in front of you. And that is so much what the healing journey is about, is how can we heal up all these parts so that we can be in full presence, so that we can see what is right in front of us and has been all along often.
Yeah, and that's just like the most beautiful part, because here I am needing to heal some epigenetics, and here Brad is really needing to heal something from an inner child wound that he never even knew existed. So
I mean, now I kind of feel like I knew it. I didn't know. You don't. I mean, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
I needed something like the plants. Why I respect and love the plants so much.
And
the wisdom.
Again, because Brad felt so loved, because he felt so held by Aya, and then because he felt so held by me, he can then go into something that really, really, really hurt him.
And that's the beauty of ceremony too, is that there's nothing wrong with any of this stuff. There's nothing wrong with grief. There's nothing. Not only that, there's something beautiful about it. Like these are the exact. Grief is the tool we use to let go. And you know, I'm thinking about when I have kids, like, so how often have I been crying when I was a little kid, and like your mom and dad are just like, stop crying. Oh, it's okay, stop crying. Versus just like encouraging someone to be like, feel that fully, and then it dissolves on its own. We don't need to fight with these. If you're angry, feel that fully, and when you actually go into it, the full thing gets released. If you resist it in any way, it gets stored. So how can we, let's say anger, because it's a little bit more of a destructive one. If you know how to use anger and feel your anger without harming other people, you have just unlocked an extremely powerful thing, right? I'm not much for rage ceremonies, but I understand the importance of it, right? If I can be angry without hurting others in a safe container, that makes a lot of sense, because that's how you dissolve it fully.
Yeah.
So find out how to cry in a beautiful way, in a supportive way. Like find out how you can tap into your anger and not actually hurt someone else physically or yell at someone else. Like if you can do this and just yell out into the universe, for instance.
To acknowledge your inner child, to actually like acknowledge like what it is that you're feeling in that present moment, and accept it. Of like, if you're feeling scared, like to actually like, I see you feeling scared. I see you being scared. That's okay. Or like, yeah, I see you being angry. What are you angry about? Like, let's work with this. And I think it's so important because, like, as Brad was crying, it wasn't a really hard cry. He wasn't pushing it out. It was gentle tears coming all out of him. And
Felt so good.
And I did
like in waterfall.
But I did encourage him. I'm like, this is beautiful. Like, let it, like, feel it all, because it's so important that we be a clear channel, especially for being parents, but also for your own freedom and for your own harmony that everyone wishes to have in partnership. You want to be in authentic harmony, and the only way that you can do that is by removing the blocks that keep you from giving and receiving love. And so that means you have to feel the things that you didn't have the power to feel before, or that you weren't held enough to feel. And so that's what I think is so beautiful about, again, just about relationships in general, because they show us what is blocked within us. And especially if we're going to be parents, I believe that our children are going to be so much more conscious than we are. So the best thing that we can do is be as clear as possible, so that the wisdom that we offer them is not our wisdom, because they don't need our wisdom. They need God wisdom.
Yeah, spiritual wisdom. Like, it's so
we need to be
Ronaldo
clear.
kept on reminding that, like, the humanity in us is fine, but it can never be the purest, because we are human, all of us. And that's okay.
And the thing he said that I want to interrupt and say there is that he would repeat that, like, spirit doesn't have fear.
Oh yeah.
But
spirit.
we as humans have fear. So, like, that's a special way. And, like, also spirit doesn't have separation either. So I noticed that if we got into a conflict and we felt separate, I'm like, well, we need to stop, because we're immediately out of untruth. We're acting out of untruth. And we need to do everything we can to create that closeness and that unity, so that then we can go beyond. Then we can actually make the next progression in our relationship. But it's not through separation do you grow. It's only by union.
So that was our ceremony. We're gonna call it there. We're gonna do it. We have another ceremony coming up, so we'll do another integration video following that, and we have the week ahead here to just, like, tap into our intention for the next ceremony. And I love that when you do multiple ceremonies, you have time to deepen.